As we mentioned last week, Cubic have actually sponsored us for a month, and you'll see the names of lots of winners of games in the top pinned comment. If you'd like to win one of these games, please let us know down below what your favourite Cubic or Untold Tales game has been. Hi everyone, a big thanks to Cubic and Untold Tales for sponsoring this episode. We've picked out 10 sale games on their ridiculous 19th anniversary revisit sale, and most of those are going to be just 19 cents for owners of their previous games in the US region. We wanted to choose a couple of lesser known ones, as well as some of our favourites.
Yep, they have a couple of new releases that they want us to mention too, so we'll do that first. We'll quickly explain how the discount works, and then, as Mark said, we'll look at some of our favourite games from theirs that are on sale. So which games are we going to mention? Well, let's find out.
First up, Glenn, we've got one that you'd love. It's called Dessert DIY, and it's a party game where, unsurprisingly, you have to create loads of different desserts. Now, this has previously been out on mobile, and over there it seems to have a very high rating. It's supposed to be a lot of fun. And also they have the release of the Pocket Pool Complete Edition, which you'll be glad to hear includes all of the content from the first Pocket Pool games.
There's also the couple of games that released last week from Cubic, being Dig Deep, which is a game where you need to gather resources from underground and take them back up to your base. You can play this with friends. There's also an idle mode where the game will help you out a bit. And you have a maze, which is a fun looking puzzle game where you need to get around a maze, colouring it in, with the caveat being that you can't stop on demand, you have to hit a wall first.
Alright, let's jump on to our choices then.
So first up then we have Coffee Crisis, which is a side-scrolling beat-em-up with a pixel art style where the story is that aliens have stolen the world's coffee and you need to try and get it back. This is actually a fun game. I've played this not on Switch, but I've played it on the Evercade. Has a very charming art style, and it is also playable with 2 players, which is always great in a beat 'em up.
Yeah, for 19 cents, you couldn't do too badly, even if I'm not very good at those games. Upsetting. Next up then, we've got Space Pioneer. It's a fun little twin-stick shooter. I'd say it's probably best played in co-op. There are 3 different classes available and you can upgrade your weapons and skills, and it does actually run quite well on the Switch. You'll find lots of bosses and you'll probably get your ass handed to you a few times, but yeah, I like this one.
Next up then we have Blade of Darkness, which is based on an older game, and Mark will tell you all about that one in a minute. This one isn't on the owner's discount, but it does have a 66% discount attached to it, which is a very good deal for this game.
Yeah, it was originally called Severance Blade of Darkness, and I played it way back on PC, and at the time it was considered a technical marvel, really. It's still quite impressive, but it does feel a little more clunky in terms of the movement. It's an adventure game, an action-adventure game, and you could slice off the limbs of creatures. So if you use the left on the analog stick as you swing your sword, it will swing from right to left, and you can cut heads off, arms. I mean, it's pretty gruesome. And it was one of the first to use blood physics, which for some reason I remember as a good thing. Very enjoyable game. There are 3 different classes that actually start the game in 3 different locations. It's much easier starting as the dwarf. So if you want to start as one, that's potentially a good choice. Or the barbarian. The other choice is brutal. I really like that, and the fact that you can unlock the story from these 3 different angles still is kind of putting modern games to shame. Really good. I enjoy this one a lot, and it runs well on the Switch.
Next we've gone for NeoDory Forever, which is a retro-inspired racing game, which includes 5 game modes. The tracks are randomly generated, there are 25 unlockable cars, 11 different environments, and it has that classic drifting style to it and a nice low poly art style.
Yeah, Glen's a big fan of, retro racers, is that fair to say? And this really does capture that flavour. It looks to be running at 60 FPS, I'll need to confirm that, but there's also a synthwave soundtrack, which is instantly going to get our seal of approval. Don't sleep on Robonauts. This one's been out almost since the Switch came out. It's one of the earliest games I played from Cubic, and it's a shooter that takes place on these spherical planes, and you can jump from planet to planet. It's very hectic. If I remember correctly, there's a co-op mode here as well, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I do like these kind of spherical games, if you like. There was one on the 3DS, I think it was called Nano Assault EX, which was a great deal of fun. This is similar in some respects, and I do just like that perspective switch. It's just different to most things that you play. Then we're going to talk about One Strike. Now, this is a 2D fighting game with the main gameplay hook being that you only take 1 hit to kill your opponent, or to of course be killed by your opponent. Now this reminds me very much of games like Barbarian or IK on the Commodore 64. I suppose you could compare it to something like Bushido Blade as well, although I'm not as familiar with that game. And it's just quite strategic in the way you have to go about things, because obviously your life is so precious, 1 hit and you're done.
Yeah, I really got into this one. I worked my way through most of this game with most of the different characters. There comes a point where you can't cheese it, but you really do learn when they're going to do certain actions and certain moves. And I think actually they then patched the game to change that slightly, because I got to a point where I could cheese with certain characters and certain weapons were much more powerful. But once you get to grips with it, since the patch, it does feel a lot more balanced and a lot more fair. And like Glen says, for me, it has that Bushido blade element to it. I really like that. I like that concept. I wish they would use that on more modern games, you know, that one hit and kill, especially in this style of game.
Next up, we've gone for the Hong Kong Massacre, which is a top-down shooter, very similar to something like Hotline Miami, where you'll be clearing rooms, going into buildings, again, one hit and you're dead and you'll have to try again. For that, it's very difficult, but you do start to learn from your mistakes and you'll be a little more strategic in how you'll enter each room. And it's always fun to just go in blasting and take out a whole room of enemies. Yeah, I enjoyed this one actually, very good game.
I've just remembered that all of these games, well, most of these are 19 cents. Can you imagine getting 9 games at 19 cents? I'm not going to do the maths. I'll let you do that. But that is a bargain. I just said bargain rather than bargain. Wow. Next up, we've got Timothy and the Mysterious Forest, which is almost like a Game Boy style Zelda clone. It's not exactly a long one. You're looking around 3.5 hours, but actually that's sometimes a blessing in disguise. This one is a typical Zelda clone, but the difference here being that a single hit and you die. It's a varied world to explore, and there are also dungeons in there as well. If you're after something that won't take you too long, that will give you that nostalgic vibe, then this might be a good choice. Next up then, we've got Blazing Beaks, which I absolutely love. In fact, it's probably one of my favourite games on this list, bar the last one that we'll mention. And this is very much a Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon style top-down roguelite that you can play solo or with a friend. Now, the interesting mechanic here is that you can take on negative traits, which you can then sell at the shop if you can get that far, but obviously it will make your run more difficult. It's not a new idea, but it is the first time that I'd seen it in this game, and it mixes the formula up. There is also a competitive mode where up to 4 of you can choose different birds and face off against each other, but for me it's all about that 2-player co-op or single player through the roguelite gameplay loop. If you haven't tried this one, I would highly recommend it. Last but not least then, we have Akane, the ultimate loading game. The game you put on when you're not sure what else to play. Very much an easy to pick up and play experience where you have a 1-button kill for the enemies, you have a twin-stick shooter style pistol, and there are actually other weapons you can unlock, and every 100 enemies that are slain, there'll be a boss fight. This has one of the best soundtracks of any game that I've played in the last 5 or so years, especially in this genre. I wonder if there is a soundtrack that I can pick up. I might have to have a look, but it's really enjoyable. Aside from your main attack and your secondary, which weirdly you end up doing in time to the music, you unlock the ability to do these charge attacks. One of them slices a straight line through enemies, which can be very useful, and the other one, if you can charge it up enough, will clear the entire screen.
So there we have it. There are some new releases from Cubic Games and their partners, and 10 of our picks for games that you can pick up on sale, either for the 19 cents price in North America or for some pretty impressive discounts elsewhere. Another big thank you to Cubic Games and Untold Tales for sponsoring this video. Don't forget, full details of what you can buy and for how much for will be found on their website, and there will be a link to that down below. A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members, of course, for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.